Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the engineer's hero part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗍𝗵 from AO3. So let's start the video. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku and Kachan were 4 years old, playing in the local park with their cheap, bouncy imitations of footballs. Green for Izuku, orange for Kaken. Kaken was proudly showing off all the tricks he could do with his ball, bouncing it on his knees, to his chest, to his feet, and back to his knees again. Izuku watched in amazement and adoration. Sugoi, Kaken. Heh, this is easy, Kaken responded smugly. Izuku tried to copy Kaken, but somehow ended up tripping and falling on his bottom, letting out a cry of pain. Kaken leaned over where he was wincing on the ground and said, "Izuku, you really can't do anything, can you?" He reached out a hand for Izuku, who gratefully accepted, and Kaken helped him to stand. "Guess I don't have a choice but to teach you." By the time the sun had begun to set and it was time to head home for dinner, Kaken had managed to teach Izuku to bounce his ball on his knees 6 times in a row. 6. Izuku and Kaken were joined today with 3 other kids in their neighborhood. Kaken was holding Izuku's bucket, labeled by Izuku's mother with his name. Kaken pointed at the second character in his first name. You can read the characters for Izuku as Deku, you know. Izuku, unaware where this was heading, gasped in joy and pride for his best friend. "Kaken, you can read kanji?" Izuku exclaimed. "What? You can't?" Kaken said smugly with his gaze averted. "And Deku means someone who can't do anything." Izuku's beaming face dropped. "Stop that," he said half-heartedly, reluctant to show how hurt he was. "It's okay," Izuku reassured himself. "Kaken didn't mean to be mean. He was just showing us he can read kanji." Later, when the other neighborhood kids had headed home, and Kaken and Izuku were alone, Kaken turned to him and said, "Hey Deku-chan, we should go to the lake tomorrow. I bet I can skip pebbles the best." Izuku stopped in his tracks, face heating up. "Deku-chan? What is it? You don't want to go?" Kaken asked, head tilting to the side in confusion. And nothing, Kaken." Izuku responded frantically, hand waving in front of his face in embarrassment. "It's just, you called me Deku-chan." Izuku noticed Kaken's face turn a little pink as he quickly turned his head to the side. "Huh? Well, you have a nickname for me, so it's only fair I have one for you. If you think it's dumb, just say." Kaken yelled out, embarrassed. No. I like it. I was just surprised." Izuku frantically responded, not wanting Kaken to change his mind about giving him a nickname. 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗃. "Well, are you coming tomorrow or not?" "Of course, Kaken." Izuku beamed. Kaken didn't respond, but had a little trouble fully hiding how pleased he was. They reached Izuku's home. "Bye-bye, Kaken." Izuku beamed to Kaken, waving. "See you, Deku-chan." There was a frantic pounding at the front door. Izuku and his mother glanced at the door in confusion. Izuku's mother stood to answer it. The moment the door opened, Izuku and his mother were met with the excited voice of Kaken. Auntie Inko, I got my quirk. Where's Deku-chan?" "Quirk? Deku-chan?" Izuku's mother mumbled in confusion. Izuku jumped up from the sofa at the sound of Kaken's voice and felt excitement rise in him at the mention of quirks. "Kaken, you got your quirk? Can I see? What is it?" Izuku ran to greet Kaken. Deku-chan, look. Kaken jumped up and down eagerly upon seeing Izuku. He held out his hands whilst Izuku looked on in excited curiosity, eyes wide. Small explosions erupted from Kaken's hands. "Kaken, sugoi. I'm going to be the best #1 hero in the world with this quirk." The following day in elementary school, Kaken was showing his classmates and teachers his quirk, tiny explosions popping from his hands. The best combination of his parents' quirks he could have inherited. Lucky. Sugoi. That's so cool. What an amazing quirk, flashy and just right for a hero. Right, Katsuki-kun? Praise echoed around Kakin from peers and teachers alike. Kakin looked proud with an underlying hint of contempt. Izuku was trailing behind Kakin on today's adventure in the woods. They were talking about quirks. You're so lucky, Kakin. I hope I get my quirk soon, too. No matter what quirk you get, you'll never beat me. Izuku was sitting in the waiting room of a doctor's surgery. His mother had booked an appointment to see when he would get his quirk. Izuku had been struggling to contain his excitement, his tiny hands fiddling with his all-might figurine, brought for good luck, and short legs swinging on the tall, stiff waiting room chairs. He struggled to contain his excitement once called by the doctor, and had to will himself to stay still for the X-ray of his foot. Whilst the doctor was pinning the photo from the X-ray on the wall, Izuku couldn't help to notice he looked oddly serious. Don't be silly, he told himself. Doctors always look serious. Whilst simultaneously trying to force himself to forget the way the doctor was smiling friendly at him earlier and praising him for being brave during the X-ray, the doctor sat down in his chair opposite Izuku and his mother, sighing. You should probably give it up. Izuku's vision shook. He vaguely registered the clattering of his all-might toy as it fell to the ground. His mother gasped. Is there something wrong with him after all? Something wrong. It is wrong not to have a quirk. Izuku, in shock, struggled to process what the doctor and his mother were saying, the conversation fading into the background. Something, generations, something, breathing fire, pulling small objects. Quirks Izuku doesn't have. Quirks, as in something he will never have. Because there was something wrong with him. Previously, when supernatural quirks started showing themselves in humans, research was conducted. Said research demonstrated unusual results in that it was common for those with quirks to be lacking in a joint. The doctor pointed to the X-ray on the wall. Despite the shock and the underlying hurt Izuku was feeling as his mother's words, something wrong. He felt a vague fascination at seeing his bones. As you can see here, Izuku has 2 joints. That means he has no quirk. The fascination Izuku had briefly felt quickly turned sour. One joint. One tiny, insignificant joint. Izuku was sitting in the office chair, too big for his tiny body. His eyes glued to the computer screen watching a shaky video of All Might, his favorite. Behind him, he vaguely registered his mother standing there. He turned, eyes filling with tears. Can I be a hero? Can I be a hero too? Like All Might? I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry. However, Izuku didn't want his mother to be sorry. What he wanted was, the next day it was raining. Izuku was meant to meet Kakin at the nearby park and tell him all about his quirk, or at least when he would be getting his quirk. Izuku couldn't help but feel glad for the rain. He wasn't sure how he'd explain to Kakin his quirklessness. The telephone rang. His mother answered. Hello? Oh, Katsuki-kun, how are you? His mother glanced at Izuku. You want to speak to Izuku? Izuku's stomach sank a little. He was dreading telling Kakin the news, hoping to put it off for as long as possible. He shook his head at his mother. His mother's smiling face dropped in realization of his refusal to speak to Kakin. I'm sorry, Katsuki-kun. Izuku isn't feeling too good at the moment. Why don't you, call back tomorrow? A pause. I think he'd prefer to tell you in person. Kakin's asking about my quirk. Izuku drew his knees up from where he was sat on the couch, wanting to make himself as possible. Okay, bye-bye. Izuku felt his mother's eyes turn to him. Izuku. A few days later, the rain had cleared up and the sun was beaming once again. Izuku had a feeling he couldn't hide away any longer. He was right. Around midday, there was an insistent knocking on the front door. Izuku opened it and was greeted by his best friend barraging him with questions. Deku-chan, are you still sick? What was wrong? Have you found out what your quirk is yet? What did the doctor say? I bet it's not as good as mine. Kakin, hi. I just had a cold for a few days, but I'm feeling much better now. Izuku greeted his friend quietly. He felt strange, small, anxious. Kakin didn't pick up on the usual way he was behaving and paid no mind. Let's go to the park and play heroes and villains. You have a quirk now, right? Kachan began pulling him out the door by his hand. Wait, my shoelaces. Kaken barely paid any mind amongst his excitement. Don't tell me your quirk yet, let me guess. Kaken's hand let go of Izuku's and went to his chin instead, pondering. So if your mom's quirk is pulling small objects, and your dad's quirk is breathing fire? Kaken turned around, finger pointing upwards in a eureka moment. Aha, I think Dekken's quirk is controlling fire. Izuku didn't say anything, and just began to feel more and more miserable. Well? Kaken demanded. Am I right? What is your quirk? 𝗬𝗄𝗧, you see, Izuku stuttered. The D-Doc, Dr. S said that I don't have a quirk. Izuku's misery only rose, having finally said it out loud. He turned his gaze to his feet. Stupid pinky toe. Huh. I'm quirkless, Kaken. Silence. Quirkless? Is that even possible? Kaken sounded confused. Izuku wasn't certain. Izuku nodded slightly. He felt small, too scared to look up at Kaken's face, unable to read where Kaken's mind was going. 20% of the population are quirkless. You really are a Deku, huh, Deku-chan? Guess it's up to me to be the hero and protect you, huh? Izuku's face snapped up to meet Kaken's. Kaken's face didn't look mocking, nor did he sound like he was being totally mean. Yet, huh? Kaken still liked him? Kaken still wanted to be friends with him? Come on, let's go play. I'll be the hero, and you can be the citizen who needs rescuing. Granted, Izuku had been downgraded from being Kaken's sidekick to Kaken's damsel in distress, but it was more than he was hoping for. More than he expected. At least Kaken was still his friend. Ever since everyone in school found out about his quirklessness, Izuku couldn't help but notice Kaken calling him Deku-chan less and less, and calling him Deku more and more. He tried not to think about it. Izuku and Kaken were on another adventure, along with a few other boys in their neighborhood. Today, they were pretending to be heroes, part of Kaken's hero agency, the Bakugou Hero Agency. They were walking in a single file line with Kaken in the front and Izuku last. Suddenly, Kaken slipped and fell into the river below, letting out a scream of surprise. Everyone gasped. Kaken! Katsuki-kun, are you okay? He's fine. Katsuki-kun's real strong. Kaken's body popped out from the water. See, hurry up and get back up here. Kaken waved up to them. Okay. Meanwhile, Izuku had run off the bridge and down to the river in concern for his best friend. He waded into the river and reached out a hand to Kaken. Are you all right? Can you stand? Kaken stared at him, his carefree smile slowly slipping off his face. It would have been bad if you hit your head, Izuku continued, unaware of the rising indignant anger flaring up in Kaken. I don't need help from a useless, quirkless nobody like you, Deku. That's mean, Kaken. Can't you see he's crying? If you keep going, I'll never forgive you. Izuku's voice was shaking, but he refused to stay quiet. Katsuki stared at him blankly for a second, and then smirked. Even though you're quirkless, Katsuki let off a warning explosion. You're pretending to be a hero, Deku? Izuku had time for one thought to flash inside his head before the onslaught of attacks. One feeling, in fact. Confusion, in addition to the adrenaline-fueled combination of righteous anger and fear he was already feeling. Why do I need a quirk to be a hero? To do the right thing. It hit him then. What he had wanted his mother to say all those months ago on the day he found out he was quirkless. A hero isn't just someone with a quirk. A hero is someone who does the right thing and helps others. Midoriya Izuku. It was Izuku's third and final year of middle school. This year was long awaited for Izuku, for he could not wait to be free of his tormenting and mocking peers. And, whilst he still considered Kaken to be his best friend, he could not wait to be free of him either. Since you're all third years, it's time for you to think seriously about your future, announced his class tutor at the front of the classroom. Izuku paused his frantic scribbling in his notebook. He was trying to note down every single detail he could remember from the hero-slash-villain fight he saw on his way to school. Izuku was slowly becoming aware that his scribbling in notebooks were becoming less of a hobby and more of a desperate, compulsive habit. Whilst Izuku cared a lot about his grades and paying attention in class, he had begun obsessively scribbling in his hero analysis notebooks during class. Usually, when his teachers would begin class, Izuku would finish his sentence and put away his notebook, waiting to finish his analysis during his lunch break. However, these days, when he was having to face the prospects of his future and his career plans, Izuku would continue his erratic notes. It wasn't the worst coping mechanism he could have picked up. His teachers didn't pick up on this, Izuku simply appearing to be taking enthusiastic notes on whatever was being taught. However, rest assured, Izuku's notes had no relevance to the class. Izuku internally groaned. Not another talk on careers. Izuku was at the point where he was slowly beginning to realize that his lifelong goal of becoming a hero was impossible. Whilst he was smart and had the ability to read and anticipate attacks, there was no way in hell he could defend, protect, or save himself, let alone others. Kaken has taught you that much. I'll pass out handouts for your future plans now, but you're all pretty much planning to go into the hero course, right? His tutor continued. Incorrect. Izuku was the only student in his class who would not be going into the hero course. Regardless of his insistence over the years that he would be a hero, he was the only one who definitely will, have to consider an alternative career path, one that doesn't require a quirk. Therefore, he was often overlooked by class tutors and career advisors, and was not provided any information on alternative careers that he could aim for. In fact, whenever he told his class tutor and career advisors, he was more often than not met with mocking laughter, scoffs, and/or looks of contempt, instead of suggestions of more realistic career options. Izuku's classmates cheered and started flashing their quirks. Their class tutor half-heartedly told them that using their quirks was against the rules. Izuku sighed and reluctantly raised his hand. He'd have to ask for a handout when class ends. What else could he do with his life? Being a hero is all he's ever thought about, all he's ever considered. Stupid. A doctor? That's heroic in its own way, right? Izuku contemplated in his head. A police officer? No, they work too close to heroes. Wouldn't want to be forced to see what you could have become, what you wanted so desperately. In the midst of his internal rumination, he heard Kaken's bragging voice. Sensei, Kaken drawled, don't lump us all in the same group. I'm not going to be stuck at the bottom with the rest of these rejects. It wasn't long before the rest of the class began yelling protests at Kaken. Kaken responded by screeching back at them, calling them extras. Izuku's hand, which had been scribbling random lines and squiggles absently in the back page of his notebook, clenched around his pen. His scribbling had become firmer and more rough, pressing down hard on the paper. He was sure to leave indents on the pages behind. Oh, if I remember correctly, you want to go to UA High, right, Bakugou-san? The tutor said, silencing everyone shouting. Izuku's classmates let out exclamations, some sounding impressed, others sounding disbelieving. At the mention of UA, Izuku buried his head into his desk, not wanting to be seen, not wanting to be remembered that he still existed. He vaguely remembered proclaiming to his classmates about how he wanted to go to UA and become a pro hero. Izuku became more and more embarrassed about this as the days went by. It's okay. They're all more distracted by Kaken bragging about himself. Izuku reassured himself. No one would notice him. I'm the only one at this school who could possibly get into UA. Kaken leapt upon his desk. I'll definitely surpass All Might and become the top hero. Forever a show-off. Well, he's not exactly delusional. Izuku had no doubt that Kaken would not only get into UA, but that he definitely had the potential to become the #1 hero. Surely that shouldn't be the only motivating factor in aspiring to be a hero? Surely wanting to save people should come first, and fame, money, ranking should come second? Izuku shook his head. He'd been having more difficulty controlling that voice in his head these days. Kaken would be an amazing hero and will defeat tens of thousands of villains, regardless of his motivations. There's more to heroics than defeating villains. Then again, what would you know? Amidst Kaken's boasting, their tutor piped up again. Oh yeah, Midoriya-san, you wanted to go to UA too, right? Kaken's smug voice cut off. Izuku groaned. He had to have said that deliberately, Izuku thought bitterly. Silence. Then the raucous sound of the entire class laughing at him. Huh. Midoriya? No way. If I can't get in, There's no way he would be able to. Izuku gritted his teeth. This wouldn't be the worst of it. Abruptly, there was an ear-splitting explosion sent his way. There it is. Izuku was blown out of his seat and hit the back wall. Kaken sauntered over, smoke billowing around him, a crazed expression on his face. "Oi, Deku, you're below the rejects, you're quirkless." Kaken bellowed cruelly. "How can you even stand in the same ring as me?" "No, wait, Kaken." Izuku stammered. "It's not like I'm trying to compete with you or anything, honestly. I don't even think I can be a hero anymore." Izuku's voice caught in his throat as he finally admitted the words out loud. He felt a lump form in his throat. He wished he could have said them under better circumstances. Kaken paused. His face dropped slightly. Then, without missing a beat, he grinned condescendingly again. "Well, no shit, Deku." Kaken bellowed. "Have you only just come to that realization now? There was no way you were ever becoming a hero. Took you long enough to realize that quirkless losers can't be heroes." Kaken turned around furiously, as if he was done wasting his time bothering with Deku. With his hands in his pockets, he slouched his way back to his desk. Whispers and murmurs echoed around Izuku. Izuku simply felt tired. It was the end of the school day, finally. Izuku wanted nothing more than to bury himself in his bed and pretend this day never happened. There was also the issue of deciding what to do with his life. Izuku felt an unpleasant mixture of existential dread, emptiness, and disappointment whenever he thought about any potential career options for a quirkless individual in society to undergo. None of them felt real or anything that he genuinely wanted to do. Izuku sighed. He was leaning more towards medical careers, but he wasn't sure what specifically. Izuku was smart enough. He had a strong stomach when it came to blood and gore, and he was passionate about helping people. That much was true. Izuku was muttering to himself as he absent-mindedly shoved his things into his bag. As he was putting away his hero analysis notebook, it was snatched out of his hand. He jumped slightly, forced out of his pondering. Kaken waved his notebook tauntingly over his head. "We're not done talking yet, Deku." Izuku let out his 100th sigh of the day. "Why? There's nothing left to talk about. I've already said I'm not applying to any hero course, least of all UA. Can I please have my notebook back?" "Huh? Who do you think you were talking to me like that? Don't tell me I need to show you your place again, Deku." Kaken cracked his knuckles menacingly and let out a few warning explosions. "Katsuki, what's that?" Minion number 1 asked, pointing to the notebook clenched in Kaken's hand. Kaken held it up for him to read. Hero analysis for the future? Seriously? What happened to not being a hero anymore? Minion number 2 asked condescendingly, bursting into mocking laughter. Izuku stood up from his desk. "Give it back." Kaken glanced at him, held the notebook between his palms, and before Izuku could protest, exploded his notebook. Without hesitation, Kaken then threw the burnt notebook out of the window. Izuku ran to the window, searching desperately. He had accepted that he wasn't going to become a hero, but that didn't mean he had to give up the one thing getting him through every day. It had fallen into the pond. Izuku was hoping that his notes would still be legible since Kaken hadn't fully exploded the notebook into ashes, but the water was definitely going to make the ink run and the words smudge. Izuku turned around to glare at Kaken. Kaken sauntered over to him and clasped his shoulder, squeezing painfully. Izuku began to feel burning and smelt the acrid smell of burnt fabric. Izuku groaned, "Not another burnt school uniform. So tell me, Deku, if you're not becoming a hero, what else are you planning on doing with your pathetic life? Is there even anything for a quirkless nobody to do in society?" Izuku couldn't bring himself to say anything to defend himself. Kaken stared at him for a few seconds, scoffed, and let go of him. He walked over to the door where his friends were waiting, laughing at his antics. He looked over his shoulder. "You say you've given up on becoming a hero, but your attachment to your embarrassing notebooks say otherwise. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life." Izuku gasped. Of all the things Kaken had said to him over the years, nothing had stung as painfully as those words. He felt a lump form in his throat, and the tears welled up in his eyes. He blinked furiously. He didn't want Kaken to see, couldn't let him see. It would only make things worse. Izuku turned and glared at Kaken. Kaken's face faltered for a second, as if he too realized he had gone too far. However, almost instantly, his face formed into a threatening grin as raised a menacing hand. What? Izuku must have imagined it. Of course. When had Kaken ever regretted anything he'd ever said? Midoriya Izuku. Izuku hunted for his notebook, mind still reeling. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Bastard. If I really jumped, that would mean you instigated a suicide. Though, would that really be such a bad idea? Izuku shook his head to rid himself of the thought. He wasn't going to kill himself. There was still a place for him in this world. He spotted his notebook floating wretchedly in the pond, where several fish were trying to eat it. That's not fish food, stupid, Izuku mumbled dismally. His lips started wobbling. That's my notebook. Stupid. Izuku held the burnt, wet notebook in his hand and stared at it. He felt the edge of self-loathing, resentment, and animosity creeping into his body. Whilst these emotions did nothing to stop the tears pricking at Izuku's eyes, they were grounding nonetheless. Stupid bastard. Izuku had no idea whether the voice in the back of his head was referring to himself or Kaken. Not Kaken. Bakugou. Kaken was the brash yet sweet little boy who, despite teasing him at first, helped him whenever he struggled with something, be it skipping rocks or digging up bugs. These days, whenever Izuku struggled with something, Bakugou mocked him and proceeded to brag about his superiority. The idea of Bakugou offering help was laughable. Kaken was someone who got excited about battles between heroes and villains, always looking forward to discussing with Izuku, valuing his opinion. Bakugou, on the other hand, blew up his hero analysis notebook with no hesitation. Kaken didn't care that Izuku was quirkless, deciding to make up for it by being the hero for both of them. However, now, rarely does a day go by where Bakugou doesn't bring up his quirklessness in a cruel, condescending way. Kaken used to call him Deku. Now Bakugou just calls him Deku. Because Deku means someone who can't do anything. Fitting. Izuku, consumed by the thoughts spiraling in his head and the events of the day, was distracted on his walk home. This wasn't unusual for Izuku, as he spent most of his days in head, unaware of his surroundings and unaware of himself muttering out loud. Although, regardless of how inattentive he was at that moment, there was no missing the giant slime monster looming over him. Izuku turned and tilted his head back to take in the villain, gasping as fear rooted him to the ground. The villain, who was already monstrous in size, was still slithering out of the grate. Foul-smelling, murky green gloop was pouring off this villain, as it writhed its way towards Izuku. Using its height to its advantage, the villain engulfed Izuku into its mucilaginous body. Izuku vaguely acknowledged himself dropping his notebook. Before he could react, the villain forced one of its viscous limbs into Izuku's mouth. Izuku tried to scream, but all that served to do was escalate his suffocation. He tried to grasp, to pull himself free, but his hands phased through the villain's slimy form. "Don't worry, I'm just going to take over your body," the villain rasped, his voice surrounding Izuku. The lack of oxygen combined with the adrenaline and the sheer panic rushing through his body, Izuku struggled to form a single comprehensible thought. All Izuku could think to do was scream and struggle. "It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. You'll feel better soon." Despite continuing to fight against the monster and screaming against the suffocating, thick, mucousy liquid that was engulfing his lungs, Izuku vaguely felt a few thoughts flash through his head. Is my cause of death really going to be killed by a villain? For someone who's spent their life dreaming of becoming a hero and analyzing hero battles, this is truly pathetic. Useless. Deku. Why are these 45 seconds taking so long? You can't grab me. I'm fluid. The villain cackled at Izuku's antics. Thanks for your help. You're my hero. Izuku felt a pang at those words. A pang that felt like shame and disappointed at himself. The one time you're remotely heroic is helping a villain. A villain who will only cause more havoc and hurt innocent civilians. Useless Deku. Izuku felt his consciousness leaving him. He had time for one vague thought to drift through his head. His prayers that this villain will be stopped by heroes before others are killed too. As his vision began darkening at the edges, he saw a large figure rise from the gutter. Another slime monster villain? Surely not. It's all right now, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. I am here. All Might? Did All Might just climb out of the sewers? Izuku was, understandably, confused. Were these some pre-death hallucinations? If so, dying wasn't so bad if he got to see All Might beforehand. Texas smash. Suddenly, Izuku felt an intense wind whip around him. His eyes opened cautiously. Globs of slimes flew across his field of vision. No slime villain to be seen. However, behind the flying slime debris, is that actually All Might? Someone was slapping his cheek. Hey, slap slapple slap. Hey, slap slap slap. Hey, slap slap slap. Izuku opened his eyes in a daze. Oh good. All Might was hovering over Izuku. Adrenaline flooded Izuku as he screamed in bewilderment, shuffling backwards rapidly. I'm glad you're okay. Sorry about getting you caught up in my villain fighting. All Might boomed, raising a hand in apology. I don't usually make mistakes like this, but I was in high spirits on my day off in a new place. All Might laughed his signature laugh. Izuku giggled hysterically in response, mind in a daze, confused about what was going on. All Might was in front of him? All Might rescued him from a villain? Anyway, you were a big help. I captured him safely. The #1 hero, All Might, he's the real thing. He looks completely different in person. Izuku was abruptly in a panic. Oh right, an A autograph. Where should I? Izuku's eyes landed on his heavily singed notebook. In that notebook, Izuku lunged for the notebook, opened it, and noticed that All Might had already signed it. Izuku leapt to his feet, bowing uncontrollably. Thank you very much. All Might patted the soda bottles in his cargo pants. Well, I need to take this guy to the police. See you again on the other side of the screen. All Might said with a wave. Wait, there are still things I need to ask. Well then, I'm counting on your continued support. And with that, All Might leapt in the sky, along with Izuku. Izuku wasn't quite sure what made him do it. Of all the impulsive things he has done, grabbing onto All Might's leg, the #1 hero, his idol, was amongst the most imbecilic of the lot. Hey, 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 hey. All Might exclaimed. Izuku's face flesh was being forced back from the velocity of the wind caused by All Might's leap into the sky. Izuku could only imagine how horrific he looked at that moment. All he could respond with were gurgles and ribbits. Let go off me. Your fanaticism is too much. All Might tried to free his leg like one would do with a petulant child. Izuku managed to force out a vaguely comprehensible response. If I let go now, I'll die. Ah, that's true. I have a lot of things I want to ask you directly. Okay, I get it. So close your eyes and mouth. Izuku buried his face into All Might's leg. A few minutes later, All Might deposited them both onto a roof. Izuku felt sick and faint from all the adrenaline that had been rushed through his body in such a short space of time. Good grief. If you talk to the people downstairs, I'm sure they'll let you down. I seriously am out of time, so I really must be off. Izuku leapt to his feet. Wait. No, I will not wait. But you should probably give it up. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry. There was no way you were ever becoming a hero. Quirkless losers can't be heroes. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? Izuku already knew what the answer would be, and he braced himself for it. He had already, for the most part, come to terms with the fact that he cannot become a hero. He just needed to hear it from All Might, his idol, the final nail in the coffin. Can even someone without a quirk be like you? Smoke began emanating out of All Might and was replaced by a skinny figure wearing two big clothes. He looked gaunt, cheekbones hollow, eyes sunken in. Did All Might just deflate? Izuku's eyes hysterically scanned the rooftop to see where All Might had teleported to. Finding no one, Izuku shrieked, Why, you're deflating. Huh? Fake? A fake? You're so skinny. The skinny figure looked back at him, unimpressed. I am All Might, he announced before coughing up an alarming amount of blood. Izuku couldn't believe it. His world had been shaken. How could this skeletal figure be All Might? All Might is fearless. He saves everyone with a smile. He's the greatest. Izuku stammered out, voice high-pitched. All Might sighed. A fearless smile, huh? He slid to the floor and continued. Now that you've seen me like this, 𝗬𝗪𝗓, make sure you don't write about it online, even accidentally. All Might lifted his shirt. Izuku recoiled and gasped. It's an injury I got from an enemy's attack 5 years ago, All Might explained. Half of my respiratory organs were destroyed, and I lost my whole stomach. I've become emaciated from repeated surgeries and the after effects. Right now, I can only work as a hero for about 3 hours a day. Izuku shuddered in disbelief. Pros are always risking their lives. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. The rooftop began spinning. It's like being at that doctor's surgery all over again. I see. Izuku managed to whisper. If you want to help others, then you could also be a police officer. They're often teased because they get villains delivered to their doorstep, but that is also a fine occupation. All Might made his way to the rooftop door. He paused. It's not bad to dream, but you also have to consider what's realistic, 𝗬𝗪𝗓. All Might left through the door. There's your final nail in the coffin. What now? Take a swan dive off the roof. Izuku just had all of his dreams destroyed in a matter of minutes, by his idol no less. What is there left for him to do? He knew this was coming, but he didn't think it would feel so awful. So crushing. All Might's done the hard part for you, forcing you to truly come to terms with that fact that he will not become a hero, and dropping you on a roof. Take a swan dive. You also have that villain to thank, don't forget, for truly showing you that a quirkless nobody is defenseless. Deku. Izuku shook his head, letting out a choked scream. Tears streamed down his face. When will these thoughts stop? There must be a place for me in this world. One where I can be a hero on my own terms. You should probably give it up. Izuku stood and walked over to the railing and looked down. He saw the traffic, the busy streets, the school kids walking home, completely unaware of the thoughts pillaging his mind. It really would be so easy to just take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Izuku stood upon the ledge and stepped over the railing. Adrenaline flowed through his body. It felt exhilarating. I hope I get a cool quirk in my next life. I hope I still want to be a hero in my next life. I hope I am a hero. Izuku smiled, tears never ceasing to stop streaming down his face. Don't think, just jump. And Izuku did just that. Izuku's eyes were clenched. He felt the wind begin to rush through his hair as he plummeted to the ground, felt his stomach drop like on the roller coasters at theme parks. And then he felt arms wrap around him. Izuku's eyes shot open. All Might? No, not All Might. Not muscular enough. Another hero? He and this mystery person approached another rooftop where 2 people stood and stared at them, mouths agape. Izuku's knees skinned the ground as they landed roughly atop the roof. There was a momentary silence and then, holy shit, it works. Midoriya Izuku. Holy shit, it works. Izuku knelt on his hands and knees and took a moment to catch his breath, adrenaline still coursing through his body. The post-adrenaline exhaustion from almost being killed by a villain, being flown through the air whilst holding onto All Might, and now jumping off a roof was truly setting in. He looked up at the person who rescued him, and the 2 others who were waiting for them on the rooftop. They were school kids who looked around his age. Hey, said the guy who caught Izuku, kneeling in front of him cautiously. You okay? He had messy electric blue hair and overalls over his school uniform. He also had heterochromatic eyes, one brown and one a piercing blue. What? What just happened? Who are you? Izuku stammered out. Oh well, I was just testing out my flying 𝗵𝘃𝗧𝗍, and then I saw you falling. So next thing I knew I was zooming over to catch you, the guy responded carefully. I'm 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗁𝗍. What's your name? Midoriya Izuku. Izuku stuttered out hesitantly. Sorry, did you say flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍? 𝗵𝗃𝗃 laughed sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. He unclipped the flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 and gently shrugged it off. It was roughly the size of a large backpack. It was made of metal, with 2 circular vents underneath it and numerous smaller vents along one side. On the other side there was a lever. There were also several fastenings that secured it around 𝗵𝗃𝗃's waist. Yeah, this is my baby. Baby number #6.3. Flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍 is a success. Interrupted an enthusiastic-looking girl, yelling in delight. She had goggles resting on her pink hair, her overalls were tied around her waist, and she was covered in various smudges of grease and dirt. Oh, this is wonderful. There was a 10% chance that it would blow up or 5% chance that you would come crashing down like the last times. I knew it was the vents that needed adjusting. Now we need to test. Mei-chan. Another girl chimed in. Enough. You're scaring poor Midoriya-kun. He's been through a whole ordeal. Enough about the jetpack. Are we really going to gloss over the fact that Midoriya-kun fell off a roof and nearly plummeted to his death? Izuku winced. The girl gave him an apologetic look. She had bright green hair that put Izuku's to shame. Her skin was a warm brown, and she had a big pair of glasses resting on her nose. I'm 𝗳𝗵𝗲. The insane one over there is 𝗧𝗵𝗲. How are you feeling? I'm okay. Izuku, voice high-pitched. He turned to face 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Thank you for saving me. Your device is amazing. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 grinned and held out a hand to Izuku to help him stand. Izuku took it gratefully. Thank you. It's been a long work in progress. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 looked hesitant. Can I ask how you managed to fall from the roof? Izuku panicked. He wasn't the best liar, and well, how could he explain something like this away? Well, it's really silly. Izuku laughed nervously. I thought I saw All Might fighting a villain, and so I leaned over to get a better look, but I was so distracted that I tripped. Next thing I knew, I felt someone catch me, and here I am. That should be okay, Izuku thought. It's half true. All Might, said Sonia skeptically. Oh, I've heard a rumor that he was going to be in town at some point, said 𝗵𝗃𝗃. So that's actually true. Anyway, can I hear more about your jetpack? Izuku felt a familiar, comforting eagerness, usually associated with hero analysis. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, who, once she had heard Izuku's excuse for falling off a roof, had been tinkering with an intimidating piece of machinery, jumped to attention. Introducing baby number 6.3, the flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍. Mei-chan, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 sighed. This is my support item, remember? I know you and Sonia-chan helped me with some parts, and I'm really grateful, but it's my invention. Okay. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 sighed dramatically. Fine. Izuku giggled at their antics. Anyway, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 continued. This is a support item I invented. I've always wanted to invent something that allowed me to fly. So for the past year, I've been working on my jetpack, which I've cleverly named Flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗍. Past prototypes have failed for many reasons. They couldn't support a heavy weight, blew up, ran out of fuel too quickly, thus plummeting. It's been a long process, however. Now with the help of my lovely friends here, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 threw an arm around Sonia and 𝗵𝗃𝗃. It finally works. Sugoi! Izuku exclaimed. Izuku was fascinated and was eager to know more. Is it intended to be a support item for heroes? How is it powered? How long are you able to fly? Are there different variables that improve or worsen the efficiency? And how long does it take for it to be powered? Whoa, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 laughed, raising his hands. One question at a time. Sorry, I get really excited about things sometimes. Izuku said apologetically, embarrassed. Haha, it's okay. I like your enthusiasm, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 grinned. Well, in regards to it being a support item, I will probably market it that way during my entrance exams to support courses, but really it's something I made for myself. Don't get me wrong, it's something that has the potential to be really handy for rescues, as we've just seen with you Midoriya-kun, but it needs a lot of work. Which brings me on to your questions about efficiency. It isn't the most efficient, which makes it redundant as a support item for heroes. But it's a work in progress. As soon as I have access to better materials and tools and knowledge, it'll be a powerful support item in no time. That's amazing, Izuku gushed. So is it really safe enough to fly it whilst so high up despite being a work in progress? Well, no, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 said sheepishly. Upon Izuku's horrified look, he said, we have some safety measures put in place. We're not that bad. Sonia hummed in agreement. So my quirk is telekinesis, so if 𝗬𝗂𝗁 was to plummet, I'd pull him here to safety. Or if it exploded, a fire extinguisher floated to them, I would quickly and efficiently extinguish him. We did a very thorough risk assessment before doing any sort of testing, 𝗬𝗂𝗁 nodded proudly. Sonia scoffed, that I had to make you do. Don't pretend that you even prioritize safety before going ahead and jumping off a roof to test whatever junk you've made. 𝗬𝗂𝗁 made an offended noise. I'm referring to you too, Mei-chan, she added. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, who appeared to be in a deep focus screwdrivering at a circuit board, looked up, hopped over, and took Sonia's hands in her own. Who has time for risk assessment when there are babies to be tested? Experimenting leaves no time for simple things such as safety, she exclaimed, hyper, as she spun them both around and ran back to her circuitry. Simple. You would be dead without me. Sonia tried to sound unimpressed, but she was struggling to hold back a smile. Ikuku smiled wistfully. So is that what you guys do? Support item engineering? He asked. That's right, Sonia replied. We all go to the engineering middle school. You might have heard of it, Jiken Middle School. Are you also interested in engineering, Midoriya-kun? 𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked. Izuku halted. Well, I'm not sure. I've not really thought much about what I want to do really, Izuku said awkwardly. Well, support item engineering isn't a bad route to go down, if I do say so myself, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 laughed. To be fair, it seems like you're really interested in it, Sonia added. Izuku couldn't help but to agree. It sounded like something Izuku could be good at, something that could give him a purpose. It didn't seem like second-hand hero work like a police officer would be. It seemed like something that could not only help heroes, but also help the average person. It's no secret that there are some inconvenient and dangerous quirks, not only to others but users themselves. Izuku could be someone who helps those people. And inventing cool gadgets and devices was just an added bonus. I know it's a big decision to come to terms with, what you're doing with the rest of your life. Hell, the future freaks me out and I sort of have a plan. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. Haha, yeah. Everyone I know seems to have it all figured out. Except me. Hey, don't stress about it. Sonia said encouragingly. It doesn't matter if you have a plan or not. Plans can change. I've changed my mind about my choice of career so many times in the past few months. You're right, Izuku nodded determinedly. He was going to go home and do more research into engineering and support courses. Hey, I have an idea, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said. Why don't you give me your phone number, and I could send you some resources about support item engineering? Sure. Izuku was flustered. This was the first time he'd ever given his number to anyone outside his mother. He handed his phone to 𝗵𝗃𝗃, who inputted his number and messaged himself. Izuku would have 2 contacts now. I think we're gonna head off now, Sonia said. We've conducted all the experiments and collected all the data we needed to. You coming with us? Oh, okay, Izuku said. He felt a little awkward waiting for them. Not that he didn't want to, but it felt like he was intruding on their little group. He also had no reason to stay on the roof. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 carefully packed away his flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, along with all the various tools scattered around. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was still tinkering away at her machinery, completely unaware that they were packing away. Her machinery was soon snatched away by Sonia. Hey, that was mean, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 pouted. Sonia rolled her eyes. We're leaving. You can work on it when we get home. Honestly, do you pay attention to anything we say? My babies take up most of my attention span, leaving no room for whatever uninteresting conversations you guys have, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said cheerfully. It was difficult to tell if she was being serious or joking around. Sonia lunged to hit her, but 𝗵𝗃𝗃 dodged her easily, giggling manically. Izuku felt envious. Sorry about them. Izuku turned to see 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had finished packing his stuff. Oh, it's fine, Izuku replied lightly. It's funny. That's one way to describe it. The four of them headed towards the rooftop door and down the stairs. They walked together along the street, 𝗵𝗃 and Sonia bickering between themselves, and a somewhat comfortable silence between Izuku and 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Izuku still felt a little awkward, but he was warming up a little. They reached the end of the street where they were heading off in separate directions. "It was nice to meet you, Midoriya-kun," 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, a warm smile on his face. "It was nice to meet you guys too," Izuku said genuinely, smiling. "Thank you for saving me, 𝗵𝗃𝗃-kun, and telling me all about your flying 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃. I hope you figure out what you want to do with your life." Sonia said, "I hope it's something to do with engineering." 𝗵𝗃𝗃 added, "Oh, thank you guys," Izuku said quietly, averting his eyes shyly. He wasn't used to people being genuinely friendly. "I really appreciate it. I hope we meet again at some point, Midoriya-kun," 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said brightly. "I'll text you, okay?" Oh, I hope so too," Izuku stuttered a little. "Bye." He waved at them before turning around. Izuku walked home, feeling warmer than he had done in a long time. Once Izuku had gotten home, he was met with his mother frantically calling his name. "Izuku? Izuku!" His mother, Midoriya Izuku, called urgently. "Mom? Mom, what is it?" Izuku answered, stepping into the living room where his mother was. She was sitting on the sofa in front of the television, clutching a handkerchief. The news was playing on the television. "Izuku!" Izuku jumped up upon seeing him. She ran to Izuku, clutching his face and throwing him in her arms. "Izuku! Oh, thank goodness you're okay. Have you heard the news?" Izuku paused. News could be referring to a number of things that had happened that day. His stomach sank a little, believing that she somehow found out he tried to jump off a roof. "Mom, what's happened?" "It's Katsuki-kun," Izuku wailed. "Kakin?" Izuku pulled Izuku to the sofa. The news was showing the slime villain that had attacked Izuku earlier with several heroes trying to fight it. The feeling of dread began to emerge in Izuku's chest. There was someone stuck inside the slime villain. It was a student. For a second, seeing the school uniform, Izuku thought it was himself. However, as the camera zoomed up on the villain, Izuku noticed that it was Kakin. Izuku turned to his mom, panicking. Mom, what happened? Is Kakin okay?" "He's okay, but it was a close call. If it wasn't for All Might..." Izuku burst into tears. "All Might," Izuku mumbled. "But I thought All Might already dealt with the villain when it got me. Unless..." Izuku's mind flashed back to when he had grabbed onto All Might's leg. "Oh God. It's your fault. Kakin almost died, and it's your fault. You're a nuisance." Izuku stared at the television, a pit opening in his stomach. Kakin was stuck inside the villain, quirk firing remorselessly, but the villain only using that to his advantage. The look in Kakin's eyes made Izuku's heart drop. Kakin looked so scared. Then, from the crowd, All Might rushed in, freeing Kakin. All Might, who had used his muscle form limit for the day. All Might, who had lost the villain because of Izuku. All Might, who had wasted his time with Izuku explaining the obvious. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. Izuku's mind flashed back to the gruesome scar on All Might's stomach. God, that must have been so difficult. I rang Mitsuki. Katsuki-kun is okay. He's been getting a little angry whenever anyone brings it up. You know how he is, Izuku laughed slightly. I think getting caught by a villain must have been really humiliating for him. Izuku could only imagine, especially considering his narcissistic preaching in class earlier that day. Mind still spiraling, Izuku stood and went to go to his room. Izuku groaned and fell on his bed face first. What am I going to do? Bakugou Katsuki. Katsuki kicked a grimy Coke bottle on the ground in frustration. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. It was easy to say something so cruel when Deku wasn't looking at him. But then that fucking nerd just had to turn around and look at him with those big, watery eyes. Katsuki had felt something stir in his gut. Guilt. He didn't like it. However, even Katsuki had to admit, before Deku had even turned around and given him that look, he knew that he had gone too far. Hey, Katsuki, aren't you and Midoriya childhood friends? Extra number 1 asked, smirking. You went a little overboard today, extra number 2 said. Katsuki's eye twitched. He didn't need his shitty friends to tell him that. It's his fault for getting in my way, Katsuki grumbled. Was he getting in your way? Extra number 1 asked tauntingly. It seems like to me he'd finally realized how pathetic his hero dreams were and had given up. You didn't need to go that far, extra number 2 added in. Their voices grated on Katsuki's nerves, and he gritted his teeth. It's not like I'm trying to compete with you or anything, honestly. I don't even think I can be a hero anymore. Katsuki scoffed. It seemed like the nerd really was starting to give up on his lifelong dream. That ticked Katsuki off for some reason. It was a long time coming, Katsuki snarled. He blew up his empty coffee can in irritation. He pisses me off so much. Then why don't we go to the arcade for a change of pace? Extra number 1 suggested. You'll come too, right, Katsuki? Yeah. Then let's go to the one in front the station. There's lots of prey there, extra number 2 drawled. Huh? Katsuki demanded. If we get caught, it'll end up on my record. Katsuki was not risking his place in UA because of these 2 fucking losers. Hey, look, his friends yelled, pointing. Katsuki turned to look. They were standing at the entrance of the alleyway, pointing to the roof of a building opposite them. There was someone standing there, close to the edge of the roof. They were wearing a uniform similar to theirs, and the sunlight was reflecting off their green hair. Hey, isn't that Deku? Katsuki's stomach sank, and his vision began to spin slightly. What the fuck was he doing up there? You don't think he's going to? Katsuki froze, unsure of what to do. Could he use explosion to get up there to stop him? Would he be able to get there in time? Should he scream at Deku and tell him not be a fucking idiot? And then, Deku jumped. Katsuki was rooted to the ground. His ears were ringing. All he could do was watch. Deku's uniform was billowing, green curls whipping around his face. Suddenly, someone swept in from a nearby roof and caught Deku, before he could fall too far down. They flew back out of sight. Katsuki instinctively stepped forward to see where they went. However, before he could even crane his neck, the extras were calling his name again. This time they were pointing to something inside the alley. Katsuki turned around in frustration and yelled, "What?" A giant, slimy, formless entity loomed above them. A villain. Eyes and colossal teeth came into focus. Its target appeared to be Katsuki, an invisible cloak with a great quirk. Its guttural voice sounded gleeful. Before Katsuki could act, the villain lunged for him. The villain's gelatinous limbs forced their way into his mouth. He couldn't move, the villain's liquid body surrounding him. Katsuki did the only thing he could. He screamed and fired his quirk. And fired. And fired. He screamed at the villain's audacity to try and victimize him. Katsuki was going to be the number 1 hero. He wasn't going to become someone who needed to be heroes to fight the villain for him. He was going to become the hero who eradicates worthless villains. His quirk trumps every other quirk. Katsuki was invincible. So why? Why wasn't this villain going down? Why were Katsuki's lungs drowning in the villain's sludge? The streets were ablaze. Civilians were screaming. The villain was cackling in joy. The villain was taking advantage of Katsuki's quirk. Katsuki knew this, yet he couldn't bring himself to stop firing. It was the only thing he had left. The only thing he had left in his defense. Heroes began arriving. They quickly realized they couldn't penetrate the villain's body. "Don't come near me," the villain laughed maniacally. Katsuki bellowed in outrage. "I won't let scum like this swallow me." Katsuki fired his quirk with all his might, but it was all in vain. "What power? I've hit the jackpot," the villain hollered in amazement. "It's my power, you piece of shit." Katsuki's vision was obscured from the villain's revolting body. However, he could see policemen herding crowds back. What the fuck are they doing gawking at me? He could also see heroes arriving but hesitating to engage. He recognized 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗧 herding civilians away, including his friends. Katsuki forgot that they were here too. They were watching this inferior villain try and swallow him. Katsuki's shitty friends who looked up to him, who followed him, who admired him for his power. This was fucking humiliating. All we can do is wait for a hero with a more suitable quirk. Katsuki heard a hero say in frustration. They were Leaving him? Katsuki didn't know how much longer he could bear this suffocation. Black spots were already flashing across his vision no matter how hard he tried to fight it. Katsuki was going to die before he could make sure Deku was okay, to get answers about what the fuck he was trying to do earlier, before he could say, "I'm sorry, Deku-chan." Katsuki's vision went black. When Katsuki gained consciousness, he was lying on his back on a stretcher. His eyes were facing the sky where it was pouring rain. His chest was burning and sore. The slime villain appeared at the forefront of his mind. Katsuki sat up in alarm, hands setting off warning explosions. He heard shouts of alarm. Hey, you're okay now," a booming voice said above. Katsuki looked up. A tall, muscular figure was hovering over him. A jolt went through Katsuki. "All Might? I am here." All Might came into focus. He was talking to a bunch of reporters carrying their cameras and microphones. Katsuki felt anger and irritation flow around his body. Were these shitty reporters recording him whilst he was being violated by that villain? Is his moment of weakness going to be broadcasted? Is Deku going to see? "No need to worry, Xiaonan," All Might said jovially, pointing to policemen loading a van with bin bags. "We've got all of him now." Katsuki was saved by the very hero he was proclaiming to surpass that same day. Humiliating. Katsuki didn't say anything and looked away. All Might tilted his head in confusion, but never failed to keep smiling. The paramedics insisted on taking Katsuki to the hospital to get him properly checked out, but he vehemently refused. He didn't need more people seeing his weakness. As Katsuki stomped off, he heard his friends calling his name. Katsuki ignored them. When Katsuki got home, he was greeted by his mother seizing him. "Katsuki!" Bakugou Katsuki yelled. Her eyes were red-rimmed. His dad didn't look better off. "Katsuki, why weren't you answering your phone? I was worried sick." She tried to sound angry, but the worry was evident in her voice. "Get off me, hag!" He pushed at Mitsuki's arms. "I'm fucking fine. I don't need you calling me." "Well, it didn't seem like you were fucking fine by the looks of it." Mitsuki pointed at the television. Katsuki was on the news. "Oh, fucking great." Katsuki repressed a shudder at seeing the villain again. Watching himself fight against the villain, whilst being stuck inside it, made him feel like he was suffocating all over again. He turned his back to the TV and went to go shower. He could still feel and smell the villain all over himself, making his skin crawl. Fucking disgusting. Katsuki turned the heat of the water, hot to the point of being almost unbearable. He tried to collect his thoughts. Deku jumped off the roof. Deku listened to him and jumped. But it's okay because he was caught. He was caught, right? Katsuki thought, trying to cast his memory back. He wasn't sure if his mind was making it up or not. No, Deku was definitely caught. What was his reaction at being caught? Was he relieved? Angry? Who even saved him? Someone with a flying quirk who was luckily standing by? Did he try jumping again? Is he considering jumping again? Should I call him and tell him to not take a joke so fucking seriously? I don't have his number. Should I go to his house? Katsuki's mind spiraled and spiraled. His body was racked with the guilt of Deku jumping and the fear and humiliation of almost being killed by the slime villain. Katsuki turned the water off. No, he told himself. Deku wasn't dumb enough to try jumping a second time. He would see him tomorrow at school. When Katsuki went back downstairs, his mother was putting the telephone down. "Inko just rang to ask about you," Mitsuki said to him. "Auntie Inko? She just wanted to ask if you were okay. I said judging by your shitty attitude earlier, you'd be fine." Huh. She's also worried about Izuku-kun. He hasn't arrived home and she's stressing he's also been attacked by a villain, Mitsuki continued, ignoring him. Katsuki froze. Surely the nerd hadn't jumped again. "I said he's probably fine. He walks the same way as you, right? He probably also got delayed by everyone fighting the villain." Katsuki briefly thought about how Deku would react upon hearing about him getting saved by All Might. Lose his shit most likely. When Katsuki entered the classroom the next day, his eyes instantly flitted towards Deku's desk. It was empty. At the same time, everyone's chatter immediately died down and was replaced with whispering. He was being gawked at by these fucking extras. Huh? What the fuck do you extras want, huh? Katsuki bellowed angrily to cover up his embarrassment. He wasn't used to feeling embarrassed, nor did he want to get used to it. He was a future pro hero in the making. Who did these extras think they were? Katsuki stomped over to his desk, sat down, and kicked his feet up. He was quickly joined by his goons. Yo, Katsuki, how are you doing? That was a pretty nasty villain attack. Katsuki scoffed. It's gonna take more than some small fry villain to take me out. Whilst saying this, Katsuki suppressed a shudder, threatening to crawl down his back. Extra number 1 rolled his eyes. Well, if it wasn't for All Might Dash. Katsuki raised his hands and set off a small explosion. What the fuck are you saying? Katsuki said darkly, hoping the extras would get the message and drop the topic. Haha, nothing, Katsuki. Anyway, have you heard from Midoriya? Extra number 2 took the hint and changed the topic. A topic that Katsuki had no interest in addressing either. He had spent the last night restless, unable to stop the memory of Deku jumping, replaying and replaying in his head. Katsuki had managed to bury the memory in the back of his head eventually. The nerd was fine, he was caught, and he wouldn't try something stupid again. Katsuki would make sure of it. He felt a sudden surge of embarrassment at his moment of weakness during the villain attack when that thought flashed through his head. I'm sorry, Deku-chan. That stupid nickname flashed through his head for the second time in almost a decade. Katsuki cringed. He didn't know Deku anything. Not an apology, not a clarification that Katsuki was joking when he said that. It should have been fucking obvious anyway. Big, green, watery eyes flickered in his head. Katsuki shook his head. He would stay away from Deku from now on, and would make sure all the extras in his class do the same. It was the least he could do. His mom rang mine yesterday because he hadn't returned home yet, Katsuki said. Shit, you don't think he... No, he's not that fucking stupid. He'll turn up today, Katsuki said forcefully. As if on cue, the bell rang. And there was still no Deku. He was never late to class. He's probably sick. Katsuki desperately tried not to think about how Deku had never taken a day off school, not even for sickness. He'll be here tomorrow. Deku was not here. The bell rang again. Deku's desk still empty. Katsuki clenched his teeth. He was going insane. Tomorrow was the weekend. He didn't think he could wait another 2 days until Monday to ensure Deku was okay. Where the fuck is that nerd? Katsuki thought desperately. Katsuki tried to rationalize his spiraling head that was thinking the worst. If Deku had jumped again, they would have heard something by now. No way would a middle school student jumping off a roof be brushed aside. At the back of Katsuki's head, a nasty voice whispered, "It would if that kid was quirkless." An explosion erupted out of Katsuki's hand. The homeroom teacher stuttered silent, and everyone's eyes turned to him. Is everything okay, Bakugou-san? The teacher asked in confusion. Yes, Katsuki ground out, his fists clenched. Right? It was Saturday afternoon. Katsuki had enough of stewing in his room. Since coming home from school yesterday, his thoughts had been solely fixated on Deku. He decided to go for a run to help clear his head. He threw on his workout gear, put his earphones in, and headed out the door. He settled to run through town. The thought of looking out for Deku left unacknowledged in his head. Pointedly, 20 minutes into his run, Katsuki was already feeling the benefits of the exercise, his head feeling much more clear. He was just approaching the local library when he saw a familiar green head of hair. Katsuki stopped abruptly, his breathing heavy and heart racing. Deku was leaving the library, holding a few thick textbooks in his arms. Katsuki immediately felt the weight lift off his shoulders and the relief flowing through his body. It was almost disorientating. Katsuki approached him before he could get away. "Oi, Deku," Katsuki called out. Deku paused upon hearing the nickname, and then turned to face him. "Oh, catch, Bakugou. Bakugou, what did that nerd just call me?" Deku ran to him, concern coloring his features. "Are you okay, Bakugou? I heard what had happened with the villain. How are you feeling? You've lost Kaken privileges," a voice at the back of his head mocked. "Bakugou?" Deku prompted, head tilting in confusion. Katsuki realized that he had been staring at Deku in silence, whilst his brain was processing Deku calling him Bakugou. "Shut the fuck up, Deku," Katsuki said automatically. "Right." The smile on Deku's face became thin-lipped. "Well, I'm glad that you're doing okay. He turned around and walked away from Katsuki. Don't you walk away from me, Deku. I'm not done with you. Deku stopped and sighed. What is it, Bakugou? There it was again. Bakugou. It sounded so wrong coming out of the nerd's mouth. He turned around and looked at Katsuki. He looked tired. His face no longer had that eagerness upon seeing Katsuki. The moment Katsuki opened his mouth, Deku looked done. What the fuck do you think you're doing calling me Bakugou? Where the fuck have you been these past 2 days? Katsuki demanded. Deku's head tilted a little in confusion momentarily. I've not been feeling well recently, Deku said, his arm raising to scratch the back of his head sheepishly. I thought I'd take a few days off to get some rest. Katsuki didn't say anything. Not feeling well? Katsuki thought. What, physically or mentally? You know what the answer is, suicide instigator-san. A voice murmured in his head against his will. I didn't mean to worry you, Deku continued. Katsuki scoffed. Don't think so highly of yourself, Deku. Deku's arms tightened around his textbooks. Right. Of course. Goodbye, Bakugou. He turned and walked away from Katsuki. Katsuki didn't stop him that time. Midoriya Izuku. It was late into the night. Everything was dark and quiet. A perfect environment for processing and reflecting and / or overthinking upon a long, exhausting, and quite frankly traumatic day. Izuku had been trying to fall asleep for at least 4 hours now, but to no avail. He could not stop thinking about Kaken. It wasn't necessarily because he got attacked by a villain. That was something that could happen to anyone, but that it was the result of Izuku's idiotic behavior, and that the villain was so powerful that it took all might to rescue Kaken. Kaken could have died. Tears began welling in Izuku's eyes again. You could have also died, said the voice in the back of his head. And not just because of the villain. Ah yes. The roof incident was also something that Izuku couldn't stop thinking about. At inconvenient times too. For instance, when he was having dinner with his mother that evening, an image flashed in his mind of his mother having to eat dinner all alone. Because he was dead, because he was selfish enough to do that to his mother. He was selfish enough to jump off a roof because he wanted a quirk. Pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. The image alone was enough to send Izuku running to the bathroom mid-dinner to sob as quietly as he could, his mother calling after him in confusion. Whilst Izuku felt gut-churning guilt thinking about Kaken trapped inside the slime villain, he felt just as much resentment towards Bakugou for pushing him to that point. Of course, All Might didn't exactly help the situation. He was harsh and straight to the point, but for good reason. All Might didn't want him to risk his life in a line of work that he wasn't strong enough for, which wasn't Izuku's fault. He was just unlucky enough to have an extra joint in his pinky toe. Bakugou, on the other hand, didn't care whether he lived or died trying to become a hero. He was nothing because he didn't have a quirk. Izuku could have had the most minor, insignificant, and, to be quite blunt, useless quirk, and Bakugou would respect him significantly more than he does now. Izuku needed to try as hard as he could to stay away from Bakugou, or at least try his best not to process a thing he says. His thoughts drifted to Akiba, who rescued him, and his friends. He thought about what it would be like to join their friend group and felt a pang of longing. Izuku cast his mind back and tried to remember what school they went to. Jiken Middle School. Izuku thought about transferring. He thought about studying support item engineering, about having friends, and being away from Bakugou and his goons. He fumbled under his pillow for his phone, bloodshot eyes squinting at the bright light. He Googled the school, tapping on the website link that came up. He scrolled through the website looking for any information on transferring. He quickly found a page with information for potential transfers listed, grade requirements for literacy, mathematics, and core science modules, biology, chemistry, and physics. That should be easy enough, Izuku thought. He didn't exactly struggle with studying. In fact, he enjoyed it a lot, and was often neck and neck with Bakugou at the top of the class. Catchment area. He looked up the address for the school. It was a 10-minute train ride away. A satisfactory behavior and attendance record. The only times Izuku ever got in any trouble in school was because of Bakugou, which was not his fault, and he was never punished. Bakugou never seemed to get any real punishment either. Izuku was also not someone to take time off school, even when sick, afraid he would get behind his classmates in academics as well as quirk ability. Izuku felt something warm rising in him. Hope and excitement. There was additional information listed about uniforms, application forms, and the approximate time it would take to process any applications. It struck Izuku then if there was any point in transferring schools when he had only a year left in middle school. He was conflicted, but a year is a long time. He could learn so much about engineering in that time, which would be so beneficial for support courses. A year is also a long time to spend with someone who despises him. It was all well and good saying he was going to stay away from Bakugou and ignore anything he says, but in actuality if Bakugou wanted to find him, he would. Izuku shuddered to consider what other awful things he could say to Bakugou that could fill him with such hopelessness that he would try to take his own life again. Izuku shook his head firmly. He would never try anything like that again. He would not leave his mother all alone like that. He wouldn't let his new friends find out the real reason he fell off that roof. He was going to become a hero in his own way. Izuku felt grateful that 𝗵𝗃𝗃 caught him, for stopping him from making a huge, irreversible mistake, and for him and his friends showing him that there was something meaningful, something heroic, he could do with the rest of his life. He lifted his phone, opened his messages, and began typing out a text to 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Izuku, thank you for catching me today. Izuku, well, yesterday. Izuku, I'm so grateful, honestly. My mind won't stop thinking about the worst that could have happened. Izuku chewed his lip and typed out another message. Izuku, I think I am going to get into support engineering. Izuku eventually drifted off amid thoughts of potential support items he could create: All Might, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 and his friends, and Bakugou. Izuku woke abruptly a few hours later to his alarm blaring. He groaned. He really did not want to go to school today. Aside from feeling incredibly tired, Izuku did not want to see Bakugou. Or rather, he wasn't ready. Feeling like a zombie, Izuku dragged himself out of bed and to the kitchen. Rubbing his eyes in mid-yawn, Izuku called for his mother. Good morning, Izuku, she said, standing at the stove. Mom, I don't think I can go to school today, Izuku said. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 rushed to him, gently resting the back of her hand to his forehead. Oh no, she gasped. Are you sick? I think so. I really don't feel well, Izuku uttered, his voice hoarse from sleep. You don't seem to have a fever, but you do look very pale, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 fretted. Right? You get back into bed. I'll let your school know. I'll bring you breakfast soon, okay? Thanks, Mom, Izuku said gratefully. When Izuku got back into bed, he checked his phone. There were some text message notifications from 𝗵𝗃𝗃. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, hey, don't worry about it. You're safe now. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, I'm happy to hear you've taken an interest in support engineering. Smiley face. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, oh, I was going to send you some stuff, wasn't I? 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had then proceeded to send a few links linking to textbooks on engineering, support items, as well as some resources online. Izuku smiled and sent back a thank you. He would check those out later and maybe go to the library at some point. That evening, there was a knock on Izuku's door. It was his mother bringing him dinner on a tray. She had come back from work a few hours earlier, her return waking Izuku up, who had spent most of the day catching up on lost sleep. He had pulled up the website for 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 and was prepared to dump a load of information on his mother. You didn't need to bring me dinner in bed, Mom, Izuku said, feeling guilty because he wasn't technically ill. Nonsense. You need all the rest you can get, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 replied, setting the tray on Izuku's lap. She rested her hand on his forehead. Feeling any better? A little. Izuku hesitated and said, Is it okay if I take the day off tomorrow too? He felt a little guilty for lying, but he wanted to delay seeing Bakugou as much as possible. Of course, his mother said sympathetically, moving the hand that was on his forehead to gently cup his cheek. Do you think it's worth seeing the doctor? Izuku flustered. No, I'll be fine by Monday. If you're sure, his mother said with uncertainty. Izuku decided to switch the topic. Hey Mom, can I talk to you about something? Of course, Izuku. What is it? She took a seat in his desk chair. Izuku took a deep breath. So I was thinking, I don't think I can be a hero. Oh, Izuku. It's fine. I don't mind. Izuku said quickly. I've figured out what I want to do instead. I want to be a support engineer instead. Inko tilted her head in confusion. Support engineer? Support engineers design support items for heroes. Oh, that sounds great. Izuku, do you know what your plan is? I know you were wanting to go to UA. Yeah, well about that. I was thinking of transferring schools. Transferring? There's this engineering middle school nearby, and I was wondering if I should transfer there. I know I only have a year left, but it would be so beneficial to get into support courses. There's even one in UA, and I've already met some kids who go there, so you need to worry about me not knowing anyone. And I've looked at the entry requirements and I meet all of them and dash. Izuku? Inko interrupted his rambling, looking amused. I support your decision. It seems like you've given this a lot of thought. You don't need to convince me. I trust you know what you're doing. Izuku smiled gratefully at his mother. Thanks, Mom. What do you need to apply? Well, there's an application form you can print off from the website, Izuku replied quickly. He was feeling fidgety and hyper, wanting to fill out the form now. We'll fill that out together this weekend, okay? You need to get some rest. But Mom, Izuku began to protest, but then sighed. Okay. He could force himself to wait. He was thrilled that his mom even said yes. Thank you, he smiled. Izuku woke up the next day and stretched. He managed to sleep through the whole night. In all honesty, he felt well enough to go to school. He really just did not want to. Izuku was starting to think this avoidance was all fear. Fear of what Bakugou would say next. Izuku shook his head. He had a whole 3 days to go without seeing Bakugou. He was going to enjoy them without any unnecessary stress. He would be transferring school soon anyway. He smiled and jumped out of bed. After having a quick breakfast, getting washed and dressed, Izuku sat at his desk. He had a fresh new notebook in front of him. His pen hovered over the lines on the cover, thinking of what to name his new era of notebooks. Izuku took a deep breath and wrote, Support Item Engineering and Mechanics for the Future #1. He would still need his hero analysis notebooks, of course. How would he be able to design suitable support items without them? He would need to carry both notebooks around with him now. Izuku switched on his computer and began taking down notes from the articles 𝗧𝗵𝗲 sent him. Izuku smiled. The familiar feeling of being inspired and writing was comforting. It sent a rush of excitement through him. It felt right. That weekend, after a lot of trying to convince his mother that he was well enough to leave the house, Izuku began his walk down to the local library. He planned on printing out the application forms for Jiken Middle School, as well as checking out some of the engineering textbooks 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had told him about. Once he had reached the library, Izuku settled into a corner and pulled out his new notebook. It was already halfway filled with Izuku's messy scrawl. Izuku had only managed to teach himself a few basics of support item engineering. He could list the properties of materials typically used for support items and the pros and cons of each. He also taught himself about tools used to build items. However, he was unsure how to actually use them properly. Perhaps that would be something he would learn at Jiken. It had occurred to Izuku yesterday that not only would he be designing support items, he would also be designing and creating hero costumes. This had filled Izuku with a new wave of excitement. He had begun researching the costumes of various heroes and the mechanics of each. For example, Mount Lady's costume had to accommodate her growing to her largest form, whilst fitting comfortably and functionally to her regular size. And Endeavor's costume, which had to withstand extremely hot temperatures lest it be burnt away. A few hours later, Izuku set down his pen and flexed his fingers. He had been reading and writing the whole time without taking a break. He stretched his arms out in front of him, his joints cracking. He checked his phone and scrolled for a while. I should be heading back home now, Izuku thought to himself. His brain was fried and he needed to play some video games and switch off for a little while. Izuku packed away his things, checked out a few of the textbooks he had been reading, and left the library. Not before long, Izuku heard someone calling his name. Or rather, calling his nickname. Oi, Deku. Izuku paused for a second and turned around. It was Bakugou. Izuku felt his heart stutter. So much for his plan to avoid Bakugou until Monday. Despite his negative feelings towards Bakugou, after seeing him on the news being consumed by the slime villain, seeing him in one piece in person took a weight off his chest he didn't know he was carrying. Oh, catch dash. Not Kakin. Bakugou. Bakugou. Izuku ran to where Bakugou was standing. He was wearing his running gear and was holding his earphones in one clenched fist. "Are you okay, Bakugou? I heard what had happened with the villain. How are you feeling?" Izuku was met with silence as Bakugou simply stared at him, beads of sweat dripping down his face. Sweat. Fire. Explosions. Better not get on his bad side. "Izuku, is he still mad at me about the other day?" Izuku thought, anxiety lacing through his heart. "Bakugou?" Izuku prompted hesitantly, his head tilting. "Shut the fuck up, Deku," Katsuki responded bluntly. Izuku blinked. "Right," he said stiffly. "Well, I'm glad that you're doing okay." He turned around and walked away from Bakugou, wanting to get away from him as quickly and safely as possible. "Don't you walk away from me, Deku. I'm not done with you," Bakugou spat indignantly. Izuku stopped and sighed. "What is it, Bakugou?" He turned around and looked at Bakugou. The excitement from learning about hero costumes had swiftly left his body, just from Bakugou saying a few words to him. Izuku felt fatigue replace any spirit left in his body. "Where the fuck have you been these past 2 days?" Bakugou demanded. Izuku's head tilted in confusion. His brain felt too fried to unpack why Bakugou would even notice, let alone give a shit. "I've not been feeling well recently," Izuku said, smiling a little sheepishly. "I thought I'd take a few days off to get some rest." Feeling awkward under Bakugou's intense stare, he raised an arm to scratch the back of his head. Bakugou didn't say anything. Why isn't he saying anything? Izuku wailed internally. "I didn't mean to worry you," Izuku continued awkwardly. "Like Bakugou would ever be worried about you." The voice in Izuku's head scoffed. "Yeah, I know," Izuku responded in a huff. Bakugou scoffed. "Don't think so highly of yourself, Deku." "See?" Izuku's arms tightened around his textbooks. "Right. Of course. Goodbye, Bakugou," he said stiffly, and walked away. Bakugou made no verbal or physical move to stop him. That evening, Izuku and his mother worked together to fill out the application form for Jiken Middle School and sealed it away in an envelope. Izuku walked to the post box at the end of the street and slipped the envelope in. It was a dark, cloudless night. Izuku tilted his head to the sky. The stars blinked back at him. He took in a deep breath, let it out, and smiled. His heart felt warm and full of hope. It was finally Monday, and Izuku couldn't hide away any longer. Admittedly, Izuku wasn't as apprehensive as he would have been had he not seen Bakugou over the weekend. He thought back to that, quite frankly, confusing interaction. The way Bakugou stopped mid-run to ask why he hadn't been in, and the way he just stared. What did Bakugou really gain from that short conversation? He shouted at him, demanded why he hadn't been in, stared, and called him Deku a lot. Maybe he had been bored, Izuku contemplated as he began his walk to school. No one else for him to torment. Izuku felt dread pool in his stomach. The sooner he transferred the better. He was done with Bakugou and his hounding. When Izuku arrived in class, everything seemed normal at first. His classmates were milling around the classroom in groups, talking about their weekends. No one acknowledged Izuku entering, simply glancing over before returning to their conversations. They probably didn't even realize he hadn't been in. Take away the weekend, it was only 2 days, Izuku thought. Not that it matters. Izuku didn't really want his classmates' attention. As Izuku walked over to his desk, he saw Bakugou sitting at his desk and his friends perched nearby. They were all staring at him. Izuku's eyes flicked between making eye contact with them and his chair that he was trying to pull out. He felt uncomfortable and a little afraid. What is with the staring? They must have been really bored. In fairness, Bakugou was trying to hide his staring, but his minions were outright gawking at him. Izuku, feeling self-conscious, pointedly avoided all eye contact, despite his skin prickling at their staring. He sat down and pulled out a pen and his notebooks for school. Usually, he would spend some time writing in his hero notebook before class, but judging by the way they were staring, Izuku didn't want to risk it. Regardless of how badly his fingers itched to write in his new notebook dedicated to engineering, Izuku wasn't having it being blown up. Nor did he want Bakugou and his goons to mock his new dream, or hear something worse than being told to jump off a roof. He pulled out his phone instead, and scrolled through a news article about a recent hero versus villain attack. He was struggling to focus. Izuku glanced over at Bakugou's group. They were all whispering furiously whilst still peering at him. It's almost like they've seen a ghost. Izuku frowned. Bakugou met his eyes, and Izuku felt a jolt go through him at the eye contact. He looked away instantly, staring determinedly at his phone screen, not processing a single thing on it. Then, he heard Bakugou hiss loudly, "Shut the fuck up." He looked over again. Bakugou had his hands raised threateningly and was swatting at his friends to go away to their own desks and leave him alone. Do those clowns really have to test his patience like that? He'll only take it out on me. As the first break was only 15 minutes, Izuku decided to stay in the classroom. It wasn't the safest idea, but Izuku didn't see the point in hiding at the other side of the school when by the time he got there, he'd have 5 minutes before having to walk all the way back. If Bakugou and his goons tried anything, the teacher would be back before anything escalated too far. Not that Bakugou would face any repercussions. Izuku sat there, twiddling his thumbs, his fingers itching to pull out his new notebook and escape the world for a little while. However, a quick look to his side told him that Bakugou and his friends had decided to also stay in class. Yes, it was best not to risk it. He unwound his earphones instead and played a puzzle game instead to occupy his time. However, was too on edge to be able to concentrate or enjoy it all. He lost the level several times in a row. Izuku glanced to his side. Bakugou's body was facing towards him, but it seemed like he was pointedly trying not to look at him. Instead, his face was faced towards his friends. They weren't arguing or hissing at each other anymore. It seemed that Bakugou sensed someone looking at him and turned his face towards Izuku. Izuku looked away quickly back down towards his phone before he could make any eye contact with Bakugou. It was then that a text message flashed at the top of his phone screen. It was from 𝗵𝗃𝗃. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Hey Midoriya. Izuku felt a small smile growing on his face. Izuku. Hi 𝗵𝗃𝗃. How are you? 𝗵𝗃𝗃. I'm good. How are you doing? Izuku looked away from his phone screen and thought. He was still on edge because of Bakugou, but he was already feeling a little better from simply getting a text from a friend. Izuku. I'm doing good too, smiley face. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. That's great. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. So I was just wondering if you were up to much after school. Izuku. Not really. Izuku. Why? 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Do you want to hang out with me, May and Sonia? Izuku. Oh, are you sure? 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Yeah, OFC. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. We wouldn't ask if we didn't want you too silly. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. We wanted to see you again anyway, smiley face. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. We're just going to be working on some projects, so it might be boring. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. You don't have to come if you don't want to lol. Izuku. No, I'd love to. Izuku. I just don't want to get in the way, haha. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Shush, it's fine. Izuku. Where are you guys meeting? 𝗵𝗃𝗃. May's basement. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. We'll come get you. Don't worry about it. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. What school do you go to again, smiley face? Izuku. Basement? Izuku added a LOL as an afterthought to let 𝗵𝗃𝗃 know he knew he was joking. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Yes. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Don't worry about it. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. May will probs make you test out her support items. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Be careful about that though, lol. Izuku. Should I be concerned? 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Well, to be fair, some of her items are honestly mind-blowing and could help so many people. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Whereas others at the very least could dislocate your limbs. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Like maybe. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Possibly. Izuku. WTF. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. It's a funny story, I swear. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Anyway, what's your school? You didn't say. Izuku. Izuku. It's 𝗎𝗪𝗓. Izuku. But are you sure you don't want me to meet you at 𝗵𝗃𝗃's? You don't have to trek all the way here. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. It's fine. We need to head down to the DIY store anyway, so don't worry about it. Izuku. Oh, okay. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. See you after school. 𝗵𝗃𝗃. Can't wait. Izuku's chest felt warm. Is this what having friends was like? His and Bakugou's friendship had been so long ago that he truly had no idea. Did it feel like this? Did it feel like the sun beaming through on a dismal, cloudy day, warming him from his heart down to the tips of his fingers and toes? His day had brightened up significantly, as he smiled happily at his phone screen, his feet tapping on the floor in excitement. And he was not bothered by Bakugou and the other two at all. Izuku risked a quick peek to his left. Bakugou was looking at him with furrowed brows and a frown, not paying attention to his friends that were bickering and waving a copy of a manga around. As their eyes met, there was that shock again that went through Izuku, polluting his light-hearted mood. He didn't like it. It made him feel uncomfortable, awkward. Izuku had also only just caught him staring, Bakugou averting his gaze the moment their eyes met. How long had he been staring at him? Izuku was determined to not let it affect his freshly brightened day. He returned back to his puzzle game with a new vigor, enjoying the satisfaction of passing the level he was stuck on. Today was going to be a good day. A few hours later, lunch break was upon him. 45 minutes of needing to hide away, when he was almost certain that Bakugou and his friends would be hunting for them. Saying that, however, they were mellow during break. Maybe it was a facade. Maybe you shouldn't take the risk. Izuku ground his teeth. He couldn't wait to get the hell out of this school. Izuku could not cope being on edge like this, having to hide and sneak around. After quickly grabbing his lunch from the cafeteria, Izuku hastily headed to find a hiding spot. He decided that he would hide in the geography section of the school library. Surrounded by dusty, outdated textbooks, it was a safe bet that no one would be disturbing him there. He sat down on the floor and leaned back against the shelves. Inserting his earphones, he drew his knees up to rest his notebook. He clicked his pen and began writing, taking short breaks to eat his lunch. The world around him melted away for a little while, and Izuku relaxed. Several songs later, Izuku checked his phone. He had 5 minutes to get back to class. He stretched and began to pack away his things, leaving his earphones in. As he was walking back to class, he noticed he had a little extra jump in his stride. Spending his lunch writing undisturbed, listening to music, and the prospect of hanging out with his new friends had invigorated him. He walked past the cafeteria, where there was a steady stream of students leaving. Listening to his music and lost in his own thoughts, Izuku failed to process his surroundings and, as a result, Izuku bumped roughly into someone, causing them to stumble. He pulled out his earphones and began to apologize furiously. "Oh God, I am so sorry. Are you okay?" The person he had bumped into turned around. It was Bakugou. Izuku tried to say something, but he wasn't sure what exactly. Further apologies? A plea to not get a beating? His mouth only managed to move wordlessly like a fish, as Bakugou glared at him with his fists clenched by his side. Students were surrounding them at that point, expecting a fight. It was silent. "You had a good run, Izuku. You could have gone through this whole day incident-free, but you just had to fuck it up at the last hurdle, huh?" He hoped Bakugou wouldn't leave any bruises too obvious for when he met his friends. Bakugou scowled at him for a few moments. Izuku held his breath in anticipation. "Watch where the fuck you're going, Deku," Bakugou spat out, before proceeding to turn around heatedly and stomp off to class. After a few seconds of silence, as everyone stood there in confusion, Bakugou's friends called out to him. "Hey, Katsuki, wait up," his friends called, running to catch up with him. Izuku stood there, mouth agape, staring after Bakugou's retreating form. The kids that had surrounded them had begun walking away from him, murmuring between themselves. The sound of the bell ringing snapped Izuku out of his frozen state, and he slowly continued his walk to class, feeling dazed. What just happened? Bakugou let him go. Bumping into him, accident or not, warranted a beating for sure. Or at the very least, an explosion to the face. Why would Bakugou just let him get away with something like that? Izuku added that incident to his mental list of Bakugou's weird behavior. It was the end of the school day. Izuku was feeling increasingly anxious. Whilst he was looking forward to hanging out with his new friends, a part of him wanted to cancel and just get to the safety of his home as quickly as he could. He didn't believe that Bakugou would just leave him alone after bumping into him like that in front of everyone. There were surely going to be repercussions. Bakugou was simply giving him a false sense of security. Izuku was staring indecisively at his phone, debating whether or not to cancel, when it buzzed with a text message from 𝗂𝗵𝗃, "We're at the gates, smiley face." Izuku jumped. They were here already. Well, Izuku thought. Too late to cancel. He let out a shuddering breath. He was nervous. He was nervous to meet his new friends again. What if they decided they didn't like him? What if Bakugou corners him and they see? As he was packing his things away, he noticed Bakugou still lingering. He hurried, feeling skittish as he left the classroom and headed to the school gates. As he approached the school entrance, he noticed 3 people standing there in uniforms that didn't match his. Upon seeing him, the figure with blue hair waved at him eagerly. Izuku waved back, a smile growing on his face. "Hi, Midoriya Izuku." 𝗵𝗃𝗲 greeted, a bright smile on his face. "Hey guys," Izuku said animatedly. "It's nice to see you again, Midoriya Izuku. How have you been?" Sonia asked. "I've been dash. Get out of the way," someone snapped behind them irritably. "Oh, sorry, dash." Izuku turned to apologize, but stuttered to a silence when he was met with Bakugou glaring at him. Bakugou turned his glare to 𝗵𝗃𝗲, Sonia, and 𝗵𝗃𝗲, who were staring back at him. They moved aside to let Bakugou and his friends pass. There were a few tense seconds in which Bakugou stared at them analytically. "Do you have a problem or something?" Sonia asked pointedly, crossing her arms and stepping forward. "Huh?" Bakugou demanded. Midoriya Izuku apologized, and we moved out of the way. "Why are you just standing there staring like a creep? Who the fuck are you to talk to me like that?" Bakugou fumed, stepping forward threateningly. "Oh, so you do have a problem?" Sonia replied just as harshly, also taking a further step forward. "Guys, please," Izuku said hesitantly. "You can shut the fuck up, Deku," Bakugou hissed through clenched teeth, glancing sideways to glower at him. Izuku felt a jolt of fear run through him at the eye contact. "Don't speak to him like that," Sonia said indignantly. Small explosions began popping out of Bakugou's palms. At the same time, stones and pebbles on the ground, fallen leaves, nearby litter all began to emanate a green glow whilst simultaneously rising and circling threateningly around Bakugou. It appeared to be caused by Sonia. "Okay, enough," 𝗵𝗃𝗲 said forcefully, stepping forward to stand in between Bakugou and 𝗵𝗃𝗲, Izuku and Sonia. "We're sorry for getting in your way. We shouldn't have been blocking the gates. Don't apologize to this creep, Takeshi-kun." Sonia fumed, the gates clanging deafeningly in her frustration. Bakugou clenched his fists, small explosions turning bigger as he glowered. "Sonia-chan." Sonia met 𝗵𝗃𝗲's eyes heatedly. He met her eyes with just as much intensity. Something in her seemed to break down and she averted her gaze, the pebbles and empty soda cans clattering to the ground. Sonia took a deep breath, looked Bakugou up and down, scoffed, and walked away. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 jogged after her, saying something that Izuku couldn't hear but sounded reassuring. Bakugou gave Izuku a final glare, before stomping off in the opposite direction to Sonia and 𝗵𝗃𝗲. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 sighed. "I'm sorry about her, Midoriya Izuku." "Oh no, it's okay. It's not your fault or hers." Izuku flustered. "She gets defensive and overprotective very easily. Don't worry about it. Bakugou is just like that." "Huh," 𝗵𝗃𝗲 said in contemplation. Then he said, "Come on, let's catch up with the girls before they get too far away." They jogged lightly before coming up behind Sonia and 𝗵𝗃𝗲. Sonia glanced at them over her shoulder. "Sorry about that, Midoriya Izuku," she said apologetically. "I hate rude guys." "Do you know him, Midoriya?" 𝗵𝗃𝗲 asked. "Heh, kind of," Izuku said sheepishly. "When they all gave him questioning looks," he sighed. "Our mums knew each other, so we've grown up together since we were 3. "Oh, so you're friends? Is that why he called you Deku? Is that some kind of nickname?" Izuku rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 wasn't trying to be condescending, but wording it like that made Izuku feel momentarily like a clueless idiot for blindly following Bakugou for all these years. "Not really. It's complicated. We were friends when we were little, but we, grew apart, and now he kinda hates me." "Yeah, but why though?" Sonia asked. "And where does the nickname Deku come from?" Izuku wasn't sure if he felt like detailing his and Bakugou's sordid history, or his quirklessness. He fiddled with the straps of his backpack, whilst thinking of a way to change the topic. 𝗵𝗃𝗲, noticing his hesitation, said, "Come on guys, let's not dwell on that guy. So anyway, what's the plan? What does everyone need from the store? Izuku let out a tiny sigh of relief. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 noticed and gave Izuku a small smile. Izuku's heart stuttered a little, and he gave a shy smile back. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 began eagerly listing. I need to get a new pair of safety goggles because my other pair got damaged by baby number 4, a ball-peen hammer, a new smaller metal file because the other one I have is too big and annoying and I can't get into the nook and crannies. Oh, and also some low-carbon steel for my newest baby. Izuku blinked. He had only thought briefly of the tools he would need to create support items, but he figured they would be provided at school. You damaged your goggles? That's so unsafe, Mei-chan. What the fuck? Sonia exclaimed. What did I say about risk assessment? Don't worry about it, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, waving a dismissive hand. One day, you will injure yourself and I am going to laugh and enjoy my I told you so moment. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 laughed playfully, looping her arm through Sonia's and clinging onto her, all in the name of experimentation. After leaving the store, they all headed down to the train station. Whilst on the train, Izuku remembered that he didn't let his mum know he would be home late. He messaged her to let her know he's with some friends. They then took a short walk to 𝗵𝗃𝗃's home. My parents aren't in right now, so we can be as noisy as we can, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said gleefully, unlocking the front door and stepping in. The only time you're noisy is when you're creating something that could explode into a million pieces or burn the house down, Sonia said, narrowing her eyes. I hope you're not planning on creating anything explosive with. Doing a risk dash. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 cut Sonia off with a gasp and exclaimed, Baby! She knelt down to pet a silver tabby cat. Oh, the baby that matters the most. I missed you. The tabby let out a tiny meow and rubbed its head against 𝗵𝗃𝗃's hand. She picked the tabby up in her arms, nuzzling it. This is my baby. She's called Akachan. She's usually okay with strangers, but I'll give you some treats so you can bribe her, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 whispered to Izuku. Izuku giggled and presented his hand to Akachan. She gave a few tentative sniffs before gently head-butting his hands. Izuku beamed and gently petted her between her ears. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, Sonia, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 collectively cooed. Ah, see? She likes you already, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said brightly. Okay, let's head downstairs. You want to come with us, baby? She put down Akachan, who walked in front of her, looking backwards every few seconds to see if they were following. When Izuku reached the bottom of the stairs, he took one look at the room and gasped. He struggled to process everything he was seeing and could only find one word in his head to describe it: chaotic. The basement itself was a big room, but it was so cluttered that it appeared smaller. Directly in front of the stairs was a square cardboard box that had rolled up blueprints spilling out of it. On one side of the room, there was a desk with a computer on it. The desk itself was cluttered with various notebooks, stationery, and empty mugs. On the opposite side was another desk that seemed relatively devoid of any mess aside from a small pile of notebooks and pencil pot. Beside that desk was a bookcase. On some shelves, there were textbooks falling to one side. On other shelves, there were more blueprints stacked. Some shelves also stored various tools and drills. At the far end of the basement was a TV with a games console plugged in and a well-worn couch in front of it. On one side of the TV, video games and DVDs were piled up in precarious towers. On the other side of the TV, in the corner, stood what seemed to be a robot. However, as Izuku walked further into the room, he saw that the chest panels had been removed, revealing it to be hollow aside for some exposed wiring. He assumed it was some sort of robotic armor or suit. It appeared that someone had taken the liberty of placing a blonde wig on the helmet of the suit and had arranged one of the arms into a peace sign. It's a mess, Midoriya Izuku, Sonia said apologetically. Try not to trip over anything. It's an organized mess, thank you, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 interjected. Izuku wasn't sure how to respond. He was so taken aback. He simply let out a quiet wow. Akachan walked in ahead of them and curled up on one side of the couch. Sonia, after placing her shopping on the one empty desk, picked Akachan up, took her spot, and placed her on her lap. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 sat next to Sonia, leaning over to stroke Akachan between the ears. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 pulled out the swivel chair from the computer desk and sat down. Izuku took the remaining seat on the couch next to 𝗵𝗃𝗃. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 spun herself round on her chair and sighed. Somehow, I don't really feel like working on my babies today. Sonia snorted. That's a change. Yeah, that is a change. What's up, Mei-chan? 𝗵𝗃𝗲 asked, his tone showing mild concern. My brain is mush, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 said cheerfully with a wide smile. Wow, I guess even the nerdiest of nerds need a break, huh? Sonia said in mock amazement. It's just as well, said 𝗵𝗃𝗲. I think it would be pretty boring for our first time hanging out with Midoriya-kun to be him just watching us work, with also nothing to work on himself. Oh no, not at all, Izuku said earnestly. I'd love to see what projects you're working on. Watch out, we've got another nerd in the group, Sonia teased lightheartedly. Regardless, I would be bored. What shall we do instead? 𝗵𝗃𝗲 asked. Pizza and Netflix, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 suggested immediately. The only cure for my mush brain. Whilst 𝗵𝗃𝗲 ordered the pizza on her phone, and 𝗵𝗃𝗲 and Sonia were arguing over what to watch on Netflix, Izuku's thoughts wandered back to the events earlier on after school. More specifically, Sonia's quirk. Sonia-san? Izuku called. Sonia answered, turning her head to look at Izuku. Can I ask more about your quirk? Izuku asked, his voice a little quieter than usual. He found himself to be timid all of a sudden. He wasn't sure why. He thought maybe it was because Sonia's self-assured and fiery personality reminded him a little of Bakugou. Sure, what do you want to know? Izuku reached for his bag and pulled out his notebook, feeling his excitement to learn about a new quirk warm his bones. What kind of objects can you control? Anything, Sonia replied simply. Izuku blinked. To some extent, she added. Much like any other quirk, I have my limits. Quirks are, after all, like muscles. Straining them can have shitty consequences. Pushing my limits to the extreme can cause me to get migraines which are never fun and require a full day, if not multiple days, of recovery. With more training and practice, I've gotten more control over my quirk and lessened my migraines. For instance now, I can lift heavier objects, increase the number of objects I can control at any one time, and further the distance and force at which I bring an object towards or away from me. Izuku was scribbling furiously. That's fascinating, Izuku said in awe. Sonia smiled sheepishly. Is it? I've always thought it was kind of boring for a quirk. These days, you see all sorts. Like the other day. Oh my god. Sonia reached out an arm to grab Izuku's in her sudden eagerness to, he assumed, get his attention despite already talking to each other. The small gesture made Izuku feel warm. It felt like he was talking to someone he had been friends with for years, and not someone he had only met once before. I saw a girl in town whose quirk allowed her to create insects at will depending on the intensity of her emotions. Sonia exclaimed incredulously. No offense, but what a hideous quirk. Apparently, she was having a tantrum at not being allowed to buy a jumbo Nerf gun set? Like, sure, okay, I guess. Anyway, it was awful, let me tell you. I was just peacefully enjoying my day before I was confronted by this giant, slimy-ass slug in the deodorant aisle. It was fucking huge. Its antennae were like the size of my legs. No joke, I screamed for my life. I literally thought, this thing is going to absorb me and I am going to die. Despite probably having heard it before, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 and 𝗵𝗃𝗲 had turned to listen to this story and were laughing. Izuku couldn't help but to laugh along with them. His heart felt light. And then what happened? Izuku asked whilst giggling. He couldn't help but to be intrigued by such a quirk. I was screaming bloody murder, and a load of people came running to see what was going on, including the mother who was, understandably, distraught. She then proceeded to scold the girl for slug forming in the middle of the supermarket. The slug kind of began to shrink until it disappeared, which was all well and good, but there was like slug slime everywhere. It was grim. It was all over my shoes because I had to squelch through it to get out of the aisle. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 was cackling. It is my greatest sorrow that I was not there to record you shitting your pants and squelching through slug goop. Sonia used her quirk to throw a pin at 𝗵𝗃𝗲's head. Anyway, what was I saying? Sonia said to herself, shaking her head a little. Oh yeah, my quirk is boring compared to some others. Clearly. Perhaps, but your quirk has so many uses and, with training, there could be loads of things your quirk could be capable of. Izuku said eagerly. Yeah, I guess, Sonia said thoughtfully. I'm very grateful for my quirk. Like it literally could be worse. It could be bugs. 𝗵𝗃 and Akiba nodded solemnly at this. Izuku let out a small giggle before asking what training Sonia was doing at the time. Well, I'm supposed to be training my quirk to control objects outside of my peripheral visual field. So, for example, controlling a book in another room. But, it's a lot of work and I'm up to my eyes in schoolwork. Izuku gasped. That's so cool. I hope you master that one day. Sonia laughed a little at his eagerness, and then gave him a warm smile. Thanks, Midoriya-kun.